Happy first Friday of the semester. So really happy to introduce tonight our Majorie, Mead, Hooker Memorial visiting professors and the lecture that accompanies that. Darci, Hazelbaker, and Dale Rush are joining us from Tucson, where they're based. Darci teaches at the U of Arizona there. She is also an alum of UNM, of the undergraduate program here. They practiced for a long time in New Mexico and then moved out to Tucson. Dale worked for Rick Joy for some time there before they founded their own practice. And their work encompasses many different scales. I think that'll probably be a theme of tonight's talk, so I'll leave it there. And please join me in welcoming them.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks to all of you for coming out. We're happy to be here. We're excited about the studio that we've kind of created with Gabriel. The Majorie Mead Hooker visiting professorship has been a lot of fun, trying to think about what we're going to do. And as Gabriel mentioned, Darci went to UNM here. That's just kind of one milestone. It's also where we met. It's where we had our first date. It's where we started our professional careers. We worked for Decapair Sabatini for a while. There's a few people here from DPS. Woo-hoo! I then worked for Don Dudley for a little bit. There's a Don Dudley in the audience as well. But yeah, we really love New Mexico. We really love being back here and being a part of this. Technically, we're considered a young studio because we've only been officially practicing as Hazelbaker Rush for about 9 years now. But I think this collaboration as designers and makers started since our first date 20 years ago. So we have been practicing in New Mexico for a while and also in Arizona for a while before we started our own thing. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the habits and the ideals and the rituals that we try to maintain as a studio to keep ourselves relevant and grounded and keep our work sort of relevant and honest. And so this is our studio. It's a single work table in the middle of a 1927 Spanish bungalow in Midtown Tucson. We actually bought the home right next door to the one we lived in, so it's a pretty easy commute. But it's made us a part of the neighborhood in a way that Connor there, our one employee, he lives like 3 blocks away. Our photographer, you'll see a lot of the photos from, he lives around the corner. We have close ties to the people that we live around and to the community that we're a part of, and we really think that's important as well. This is what it looks like on a daily basis, like just tools and crap and pencils and everything just kind of laying around, scattered about.
So, as Dale mentioned, we wanted to talk about some of the habits that are important to our practice. And while these ideals are not necessarily new or even much more than good common sense in most ways, as the saying goes, a person's future is formed by their habits. And we think it's a simple axiom to develop a creative practice on as well. So for us, every project is an opportunity to create something meaningful, regardless of size, scale, scope, or budget. We always allow context to inform the design of our projects. We feel that refined solutions are created through iteration. So one of our daily habits in the studio is that we pin up our ideas, we talk about them, we debate them, we pin them down, we refine them, we pin them back up, we explore, and we always try and stay curious. We also like to embrace the honesty of the craft that's imparted through design. And we also want to design the experience. And so that includes the actual project itself, but the memories that are left behind once our time with our clients has passed. And as we all know, architecture is a multivariant problem, and that these 5 habits cannot exist in isolation. So our work and process is influenced by other factors, such as client wishes, budget, constructability, constraints, or materiality. These habits started early on in our architectural education, and we were both inspired by various mentors throughout our early careers. And the habits that resonated most with us were those nurtured by the act of thinking through making. For me, my ethic of making allowed for an understanding of how components came together. These objects were made to help me understand concepts or ideas I was exploring. In this case, shown here is an infinite horizon apparatus that I created when I was a third-year student here. We took a trip to Marfa, Texas, and we studied the work of Donald Judd. And I created this basically sort of hat that you would put on, and when you wore it, the glass was situated at such a moment in your eyesight that it sort of blended the sky and the horizon together.
Yeah, and when I studied architecture at Auburn University in the heart of Alabama. I had the lucky opportunity to be part of the Rural Studio there with Sambo Mokbe as the mentor. And Sambo instilled a lot of good habits, a few bad habits as well, but they all stuck with me. But the one that most stuck with me was that architecture is about connections, connections between space, connections between material, connections to history, connections to the place you're in, but most of all, connections to people. And the idea of design and experience sometimes is an architectural phenomenon. You try to create beauty. Sometimes it's just creating a better life for someone and just making a warm and safe place for them to live. And I think that was one of the things that kind of stuck with us. Designing the experience is always going to be important. So me and a few other students, we designed this community center for a small community, Mason's Bend in Hale County, Alabama. It was a tight budget. With like most student projects, all of our labor was free, but the materials had to be donated or had to be sourced in a resourceful way. We used rammed earth, the cypress beams there. We actually cut the trees down and milled ourselves. The steel was donated, and most notably, we pulled the side windows out of late 80s sedans because they had the perfect holes for flipping them over and attaching to the steel. And what resulted was a community center that could fit 150 people, but was also just a comfortable place to hang out with your friends and grab a smoke or just get in out of the rain or whatever. And this time at the Rural Studio kind of, I guess, reinforced in me that I think through my ideas better in physical space. And so whether I'm sketching or building a study model or creating a full-scale mock-up of some idea that we've come up with, I tend to think through my hands. And so we've always kept a space for making. And early on, when we were living here, that was a couple sawhorses and some secondhand tools from the flea market. Now it's roughly a 2,000 square foot shop with a full woodworking area, a full steel area, and now I'm sharing shop space with a blacksmith, so we even have a forge and a few other things to play around with. So we're constantly sort of working through our ideas like this.
So while we both embrace the maker's ethic of creation, we use our differences to hone these ideas that become solution. For us, iteration and debate of a design problem from different sides allows us to explore new ideas and notions that we might not have arrived at otherwise. Dale is the practical craftsman, finding beauty in the simple functionalism of the idea. And I tend to approach the design process as more of an abstract emotional thinker, looking for the aesthetic solution. And for me, over the years of sewing, I've found that there are many similarities between architecture and sewing. And I think that these habits that we've established as part of our practice apply in this context as well. My body is the site, and I work through constraints of materials and craft. In each case, the context is unique and site-specific. And in this case, it was a problem to solve about using a minimal amount of fabric and seams to create a space for one. While our approach and even our tools differ, the function and goals behind the tools we use are the same. Yeah,
and so every project is an opportunity to create something meaningful. And regardless of scale, whether it's a sewing project or a sculpture or jewelry, we try to apply the same habits to the project at all levels. Early on, we were working for other people, and we had all these pent-up creative ideas that we wanted an outlet for. And every birthday present for a friend or a Christmas present or a need for a coffee table or a shelf became an opportunity for us to design something. And every design opportunity became an opportunity to make something. and this is where we ended up. So this was a simple piece of walnut that someone gave to us, a slab. It's roughly 5 feet long, really wide. We did nothing to it. It was just so beautiful. We sanded it, oiled it. It sat around for a while we worked out how to make a base for it that didn't feel overly designed, because we worked out several ideas that were just trying too hard. And then we sort of landed on a simple H brace, but it was trying to display how beautiful the wood was, use it functionally without over-designing it in a way. Here, the Corrales Art Center, they had a fundraiser years ago that our friend Tyson sort of roped us into. And they would basically commission lanterns from artists and architects all over the city. And we came up with this wood idea. I can't remember exactly what the original idea was, but we were going to use this block of old oak and probably perforate it in some way or slice it in some way. And in the process of chopping it up, the damn thing split apart. And instead of scrapping it and starting over again, we used that fissure as a opportunity, I guess. And we gold leafed the interior, held it apart just enough for the light to escape with these brass pins. And then on the bottom side, there's a place for a tea candle inside. So I think it's important because the limitation of the material basically helped us come up with a design for it.
Right, it became sort of the driving factor.
Yeah.
So similarly, we've always been inspired by architectural pottery of the 1950s and 60s, and we've always found in the past that it's very difficult to find a nice, simple, pure white pot. So one day we were in the shop and Dale had some steel pipe laying around, and we decided to turn these into planters. So we got them welded up, we powder coated them, and then we used just some simple steel rod to bend them to make a base. And that powder coating endeavor turned into another opportunity for our home, in which we wanted a powder coated steel record shelf. And we also wanted to incorporate this idea of a dog perch for our dog. We used bent plate for the top, and we also used plate steel dividers to help organize the contents. And for us, this was also a study of efficiency because we were able to fabricate all of the parts out of a single 5x10 sheet.
Yeah, and the bent plate led to other ideas like this handle, simple bent stainless steel wrapped in leather right where you grasp it, just to offer a little bit of comfort as you grab the hard steel.
So this was our first sort of real architecture project together, and we also worked on this with our friend Daniel Barboa. It's located in Mountaineer, New Mexico, in the just sort of south of the Manzano Mountains. It was a permanent piece for the land-based art site, and the deck was meant to be an intimate reflection space on a small hill overlooking the valley to the east.
Right. So the land was an art site. You can probably go to the next one. And they would host exhibits by other land-based artists, but all of the exhibits were temporary, and they wanted one sort of permanent place for this to happen, but it meant that we had to build it without making scars upon the land. So we used the cattle tracks. We would have wheelbarrows with all of our tools and stuff, and we would follow the cattle track up the hill instead of making our own trail. So we tried to use the scars that were already there for moving materials. And then in some cases, like with these really heavy beams, we had to create a pulley system. We created the rails with the old 2x8s, and then fence posts became the rollers, and we anchored a winch up at the top. We come along, and we just slowly cranked them up the hill, like the image on the left. And we dug all the footings ourselves. There's Daniel and I in the middle, actually messing around with that. One other thing to note, this happened, I think it was June to September was our construction time. So we were out on a site with no running water, no power, and we would go down there and camp out every weekend and kind of put this together. Yeah, just more images of us playing with the idea of scale and how you sort of hover out there.
And what we loved about this project was the dichotomy of the design. One moment you could be nestled up against the back wall of the deck, sitting within the hillside. The next moment you were floating above the canopies in the small junipers and piñons exposed. So this is a renovation of an existing 1927 bungalow. It's actually our home in Tucson. We left Albuquerque in 2005 and moved to Tucson. After being there for a couple years, we decided it was a place that we wanted to settle, so we bought this in 2008. At the time, the writings were on the wall that a recession was coming, but that didn't seem to faze us. There was also a housing boom happening in Tucson, so we sort of bought this sort of at the high end of the market. But we wanted to use it as a springboard for establishing our own ideas about practice. We wanted to test our ideas. We wanted to use it as an experimentation for materials and reuse. And also in this case, budget was a restraint for us. We had a very limited budget that we were working with.
Yeah, so here's the plan on the left of what it was before and what we proposed or what we ended up building on the right. You can see it was a 2-bedroom Jack and Jill bathroom here, a dark living room here, and then this kitchen that was super big but also super inefficient at the same time. There's an opening kind of on every wall, and it was impossible to get like a good amount of storage in there. So we pulled out bearing walls, put beams in the ceiling here and here so that we could open up the space, create a more efficient galley kitchen with a lot more storage, and then offered up more opportunities for storage for the closet here in the bedroom. And because we had lived in so many small houses with tiny bathrooms, we really wanted to blow this out and make it a much nicer bathroom. That's where we ended up.
And these are just some photos of the existing conditions.
Yeah.
I think pretty typical of a sort of untouched bungalow from 1927.
Yeah. And this was us. In 2 weeks, we demoed and just ripped it all apart. And then it took us 4 or 5 years to put it all back together.
Yeah, I mean, because again, we were still working for we're working for other firms at the time, so this was sort of a weekend and evening project. Yeah. And it was also, this was a really huge learning experience for me because I'd never been through this process before, right? I think it's one thing to go to site visits and sort of see what's happening. It's another experience when it's your own house and you really just sort of gutted it. But one thing we noticed was that when we started opening up the walls and the ceilings to replace all the electrical, we were really drawn to the beauty of the lath that was on the walls. And we were amassing these huge piles of it, and we started wondering if there was a way that we could reuse it.
We felt ashamed to throw away so much beautiful wood, so it ends up being reused.
So here you can see this is just another sort of in-process photo. Over here on the left is looking at what used to be one of the front bedroom. Sort of in the middle of the space is the bathroom shell, and then looking down through the kitchen into the old addition.
I don't know what to say here.
These are.
I didn't want this in here.
Dale doesn't like that this slides in here, but so these are just photos of us working, and I think that there were many moments during this process that we really felt kind of overwhelmed. And I always joke that I think that what we were actually doing here was sort of these moments of silence, wondering what we had gotten ourselves into. But, you know, and as Dale said, like the house came apart really fast, and it was just putting it back together that really took a long time for us.
But I mean, part of that was also because we would iterate ideas, and we were experimenting, and on our own home in a lot of ways sometimes by reusing materials, but then also we changed out all the windows were single pane glass, and we put insulated glass in all the existing sashes, which means everything got heavier and you needed to increase the weight, but the weights wouldn't fit within the window weight area in the sashes, or in the frames. So we ended up having to cast our own weights with lead because it's heavier and takes up less space. So we were like smelting lead in a cast iron skillet
on a turkey fryer
outside, pouring it into a form that we had made with some steel pipe, and with like barely any safety gear probably.
But those are the fun moments.
Those were the fun moments. Yeah.
So as you can see here, this is just the process of us reusing the lath. What we decided to do is we basically clad the bathroom volume with the lath. We were also testing ideas out about how to integrate a door into the lath, and so we were sort of coursing out the lath as it moved across the door, and then up sort of in the top corner, you can see we routed out some small slots for the supply.
Right, so this is the HVAC supply, and then when we brought the lathe up, we just cut little slots, and then that became a sort of an integrated grill. And yeah, and here it is today.
This bookshelf was actually another one of our first projects together. We did this while we were still living in Albuquerque, and it's basically just MDF. We spray painted the wood, wet sanded it, repainted it, and then we just used basically bracket hardware to put it together.
Yeah, it's just like hardware from Home Depot. It weighs a ton.
This is looking into the bathroom from the living.
Yeah, and so the bathroom, maybe go back one second. Yeah, so we created this. The concept in the plan was that the bathroom volume would be skinned by this wood skin. You open up the skin and you get inside, and it's a white volume. And then there's this wood box kind of floating within the space, and a wall-mounted toilet and sink are on either side of that.
This is looking back, standing in the shower, looking back. And another one of our concept was that we wanted to sort of use steel anytime there was open shelving. So that was a sort of constant as we moved through the project.
Yeah, so the steel goes away, and what you see is just kind of the product displayed. One other thing to note, so I don't know, there's probably a few architects who've done wall-mounted toilets before. And they always have this giant panel for the flusher. We ditched that, and Darci made this little stainless steel push button for the flush on the toilet. And so we had to make this thing so we could get it apart in case we ever had to fix the toilet. Which is a small thing, but also like another problem-solving effort to sort of figure out how to do all that and make it look as seamless as it does.
Shower. This is the bedroom side.
Yeah, so the bathroom's on the other side. So the wood skin of the bathroom repeats itself here in the bedroom.
This is a kitchen, IKEA fronts. We use soapstone for the countertop, and then you can see those steel shelves.
Yeah, and then after a few years of living here, we realized we needed more storage. We needed more horizontal surfaces, as is the case for most small houses. But we were out of wall space, and so we decided to build some shelves that would actually sit in front of the window. So we get borrowed light through the shelving, but also get a bit more storage. And this is not how it is. It shoots really well like this, but it's loaded up with stuff.
We clean it up for the photo.
Yeah. But it's 10 gauge plate, kind of broken and stiffened up, and then just this center column in the middle that's just round rod with these rings, and the plate shelves just kind of hang into those rings. So we really enjoyed getting into the detailing of this, and we're using it on a remodel now on a much bigger scale and probably a bit more refined in the way we executed it here. That's it.
So this was our first sort of official project as a firm. A young couple in El Paso offered us the opportunity to design their home. They had seen our place in Tucson, and they really appreciated, I think, some of the details and the experimentation that we did on our own house. And they graciously asked that we be involved in the fabrication and making of the details as much as we wanted. And as you know, El Paso is a unique border town. The Franklin Mountain Range extends into the boundaries of the city like a peninsula. And the elevation change is roughly 2,500 feet above the valley floor. The historic downtown area is pinched between the southern tip of the mountains and the Rio Grande, and Juarez is a huge city that stretches across the expansive valley of the river. In the late 1800s, the railroad brought people and commerce, and El Paso became a transportation as well as a cultural hub for the Southwest. It was a quintessential cowboy town, and in some ways it still is.
Yeah, these murals and the signs from downtown, I think there's still like a pride in that cowboy history that El Paso has, even though it's still kind of a metropolitan city now. And, prominent bootmakers still call El Paso home, Lucchese being one of the most notable ones. So Jeremy and Heather had this site here, the red dot is, perched right at that sort of border between the urban city and the Franklin Mountains. They had a site right at the top of this development, new development that was happening. They had the top site, and this is all state park land to the south and to the east. So there was always going to be protected views to the south in the city and views up to the peaks of the mountain. The site was steep. It's probably about a 25% slope, populated with lechuguilla, ocotillo, and these beautiful weathered gray stones. So this was an initial site impression diagram that we kind of created. This is their lot. You can see the property lines here. They were always going to have a neighbor to the north. There's kind of a natural ridge that follows the property line, like a fold in the land. So we decided to push ourselves as far to the south as we can in order to kind of push away from the northern neighbors and maybe offer a bit of privacy, but also to push right up against this canyon edge would sort of make it feel like you're right on the precipice before falling down in. And because the state land to the south and to the east was always going to be open, it allowed for these great expansive views to Juarez and the lights of Juarez. So there's a couple images here of what you would see from the site. The view to the south is the lights of Juarez. The view up to the east is the peaks of the Franklin Mountains. You're so high on the mountain and it's so steep that even your neighbor downhill from you doesn't block your view. So this image off to the left is the sunsets that you see across New Mexico. And you could see the storms rolling in like it is in that image. One of the coolest things, I'm sorry. Kind of at an oblique angle is Mount Cristo Rey. It was kind of became an important thing. So the sunset or the sunrise comes up and over the Franklin Mountains, and Mount Cristo Rey is the first thing to get kissed by the sun. And someone, put the little cross up there. So capturing that view from some moment in the house was important to Jeremy because he wanted to kind of sit down, have his coffee, and just start his day that way every morning. Oh, sorry, this is still me. I just want to make sure. I'm realizing that my phone might be going on. Sorry. So this is the site. You can see the contours are super tight, 25% grade. The cul-de-sac was already there. We decided to come in as low as we can to try to minimize our impact on the land, similar to the deck project that we started with. So you come in with your car, pull into the garage mash down low. The living mass would be a story up above that and would open out onto the southern edge. You can kind of see the fold in the contours here. That was the beginnings of that canyon wall. And then as you come up to the bedroom mass, it's kind of a floating box, and the bedrooms would be here with the master opening up into this terraced garden. And the site was so steep coming down here that we wanted to slow that flow of water that's going to be screaming down the hill, but also kind of create a moment of like a manicured garden to juxtapose against the wild nature of the slope. So we'll just walk through this kind of quick. The owners would come in here to the garage, then they would come into the mudroom, ascend a set of stairs that would bring them into the backside of the kitchen, and this became like a pantry area. And then the kitchen and the dining room open up onto the pool patio, and as you walk back into the family room, you end up below grade. And so one of the things we also haven't touched on is the fact that the northern side is where your neighbors were going to be. Usually we want to try to capture as much northern light as we can, but we also wanted to maintain some privacy. So the only opening on the northern side is this huge window from the office space, but it's protected because there's this courtyard. It's actually sort of below grade. So there's this courtyard that opens up off of the office. It allows light to come in without imposing in the privacy area. And then you ascend the stairs, and you are in the bedroom wing with the kids' bedrooms down at one end and the master bedroom here opening up onto the terraces. And here I was going to say,
here's just the site section sort of reiterating what Dale was walking through the plan. So basically, I think the most important thing for us was, as we cut this section, that sort of every level of the home had a connection to grade.
And you can see how the slope of the site really dictated the massing and how you had to. The only other strategy would be, and this is what actually gets implemented in El Paso a lot, is you bulldoze and build giant retaining walls in order to build a flat building site. And instead, we tried to create something that would sort of step down the hill and use the site to its advantage.
Yeah. And I think conceptually, one of the things that was important to us, sort of this idea that the sort of daily living space of the living in the kitchen was really anchored and grounded. And that was reflected in the materiality, and that we used stone for the sort of main mass. And then the upper sort of cantilevered box was a white stucco that was referencing an abandoned quartz mine that was just off the property.
Right.
So as we mentioned, the idea about the stone walls for our mass, that was one of the things that we were noticing when we were in El Paso, is that these stone walls are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're in all colors, they're in all sizes, they're in all shapes, and they're in all scales and textures. And so for us, that became sort of a driving concept, and sort of how could we use this very typical material
And the local crafts.
in sort of a new way. So what we ended up doing was we found a local quarry that could source a gray stone that sort of referenced the gray stone that we found on the site.
And because the living mass is this gray stone, it sort of disappears from a distance into the site, and what you see is kind of this floating white box kind of hovering above the landscape. And then so the bedroom wing is the white box, and then it offers an opportunity below it for this outdoor living room. So you come out of the kitchen here, the pool is off to the left, and then the kind of hangout space with the barbecue grill and everything is off to the right.
So similarly, I think we start to find that there are these sort of ideas that sort of repeat themselves. And in this case, this was this idea of like this protected, anchored space up against the earth, contrasted by this like really open and exposed outdoor living space where the pool was. We were sort of like perched out over the edge of the site.
Right, and we also talked about the living space, the living room, the kitchen, and dining, that would be the sort of grounded space for the daily functions. And the bedroom space was the place for dreaming and for playing, and that would be the sort of light, up in the air, more playful kind of space. Yeah, just some shots of the terraces, and then the amazing views. They're so high up, it's just panoramic all around. And then the entry sequence. And so as a guest, you would park low and ascend these stairs to a door that's roughly 12 and a half feet tall.
Heavy door.
It's heavy, but it's really, it works easily. So Jeremy would open the door, you would enter, and you would enter into this sort of entryway, sort of contained by the stone walls. And we wanted to, it was such a tall space after conceptualizing it, we felt like we needed to bring the sense of scale down. And so we created this like layering of light. So you can see that hanging bulb there is meant to sort of come down and reference the scale of a person. As you walked in, these would be sort of bringing the scale of the space down. And you can see down in the bottom left here, that's just a little pin. So it was also, that's their coat closet. So you would just hang up. Yeah, I guess I should use this. It disappears.
Yeah, it kind of disappears.
Yeah. So you would, in random places, we just place these pins in the stone joints, and that would be like where you'd hang up your coat, and then the bench was where you'd stash your cowboy boots, and then you'd walk around the corner, and you would have this framed view of the lights of Juarez if you're at night, or just this beautiful light to the south. And in the mornings, Jeremy can sit on this couch here to the left, and the corner window frames Mount Cristo Rey just right. And then here's the kitchen. It's pretty simple. We created just it's almost a galley kitchen like ours, but it has this island. The island becomes the place where the family gathers for everything. They have breakfast, they have dinner. The kids do their homework while Heather's cooking. It's like the hangout space for everyone. This door here is the door to the pantry, so you don't really even know it's there until you're invited by the family back into that space.
So this was another opportunity, I think, for some custom pieces. So Dale and I designed and fabricated the dome lights. It's just a simple brass dome that we blackened on the outside and we polished on the inside. And for the most part, we, again, just used standard off-the-shelf components for all of the lights. We tried to stick with this idea of like a dark steel, and that all the cords were wrapped with jute. This is us just working in the shop, trying to get the domes ready before we blackened them. Here's a detail of the jute wrapped cords and the polished, but still a little bit textural interior of the light.
Yeah, because the brass was spun, it's kind of an industrial process. It's not meant to be a finished thing. So the striations are the actual forms of the spinning process, which we thought was kind of great. We polish it, but it still creates this sort of texture that cascades the light in all sorts of directions.
Ms. Dale working on the install lights. And I think another thing that was sort of really important to the project was this idea of scalar concepts. So we had the big overarching ideas of the concept, and we also had the small ones. So in this case, we fabricated these steel boxes to embed the outlet switches and hose bibs into the steel in an intentional manner. While we were working through the electrical plan, we came upon this sort of
problem.
I guess it's a problem, but like, how are you going to put a light switch on a rough, bumpy stone wall? And there was something about that just didn't sit right with us. And so this is when we came up with this idea to sort of dig out a little bit of the stone so that these steel recesses can be displayed.
Well, we would actually mount the box. We would mount the box first, and then it was easier for the craftsmen to deal with too. They actually enjoyed this a lot better than having to run conduit or wires and try to fit something within a stone wall. They could mount the box, run all their conduit, Romex, put the box in place, and then stone right up to it, and it was a much faster process.
And this is another case where we were provided the opportunity to refine our ideas. We had a desk very similar to this in our own home, and this was just an evolution on the idea of a steel and wood desk. Conceptually, this was sort of the material palette also for the first floor, so we pretty much stuck to stone walls, concrete, and then walnut for all the casework and wood.
In the grounded areas, kind of dark and heavy, and then as you ascended the stairs, the material palette would change, and it was white oak and white plaster throughout. As you came to the top of the stairs, the library continues down the hallway to the kids' bedrooms, and then the long window to the west frames the view of Juarez. And then there's a tall window at the end of the hallway, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, that became the sort of aperture that pulled you down the hallway and illuminated everything. And then looking the other direction from that area, you end up at the entry door is what we're looking at there, to the master bedroom.
Yeah. So long, high, built-in casework on one side, and then we did sort of what we called the low dressing table that also was integrated into the headboard of the desk, or the bed.
And then the bed looks out into the landscape like that. So a connection to the outdoor terrace. You can kind of see the Acatillo and the Lechuguilla kind of coming down the mountainside in an untamed way, and then it hits the wall and it becomes this manicured garden. And the connection from the bathroom is through the same opening into the same terrace.
And then this is looking at it from the outside in. And one of the great things that happened, that was a sort of in-process design evolution, was we were on site standing in the bedroom, and the walls had been sort of framed up, but we could still see through them. And originally, originally this wall here was going to continue all the way to the exterior. But while we were standing there and we could see through it, it sort of it was like an aha moment where we thought, like, maybe it would be much better if the bathroom, core of the bathroom, where the toilet and the shower were, was almost like a ring road, so that you could circulate freely around it, and it would allow you to have access from the bathroom either direction.
And it was a little bit like our own bathroom in that wood box in the middle of our own space. You know, it's a similar kind of concept to create this racetrack, as we call it, so you can access from the bedroom, you can access the shower or anything on all sides. It just, volumetrically, it made the most sense.
Right, and then that also evolved into this sort of change of the window system, because the window and door system, because now we could use a multi-slider that could sort of operate on either side, where previously we were sort of constrained by that sort of wall that intersected with the exterior wall. Yeah,
and then we made a lot of the cabinet pulls and the door handles, and I think this shot is, I love it because it's kind of it's showing off the marriage of our skill sets. So I weld, I make things that are hard and dirty, and then Darci wraps them with leather and makes them comfortable and usable. These were some of the objects. So a simple door handle, a cabinet pole that's like bar stock, again, just kind of wrapped. And then I think we have some, there's the cabinet poles in place.
Exterior door pulls. Yep. Same sort of material language.
These were for the larger doors, so the scale had to be bigger. And then, one of the last moments. So while we were pouring the concrete, we wanted to get the family to stamp their hands in the concrete. And so at the top of the stairs in the pantry, where it was kind of more of the family space, everyone put their hands in the wet concrete. And then we wanted to mark it with this little date stamp. But it was almost like a last minute idea to do this. So right before a trip, we threw this together with some scrap pipe and bar and brought it out there. And they actually have held on to this. It becomes a cherished object that will always remind them of the cherished moment of all of them stamping their hands in the concrete.
So this is a fairly recently completed project. We just wrapped this up over the summer. It's a renovation of a salon. My good friend, and I was also her client, had a shop sort of in South Tucson, and there was this terrible fire that broke out and basically destroyed this whole strip. But what was one of the most really amazing things about this was that the Tucson community rallied, and they all raised this money to help her rebuild her shop, as well as offer to donate materials and time in the rebuilding effort. So we ended up finding a space centrally located in Tucson. It's at the Mercado. It's a great place where everybody loves to hang out because it's sort of a courtyard space, and there's food and other activities that you can do there. And this is sort of just an exploded axon that starts to talk about some of the concepts and the constraints. So again, we had a really tight budget. It was less than $20,000. The existing shell was built in a way that we could not cut into any of the walls to provide electrical. And we had a really quick turnaround time because she really wanted to get back in business. So this was a quick project, sort of flush out your ideas fast. Don't meditate and marinate it on it too long. But another driving concept was this idea that the client, Anna Jo, she's very haptic. She works with her hands, and so we wanted to sort of pull that thread through the project. And she also focuses on sustainability, and so we brought that in along with trying to source materials ethically when we could. And so one of the solutions was this Blanco. For the electrical was this Blanco idea, and that if we could just bump out part of the wall instead of having to fur out the whole thing, that would allow us to bring the electrical in and also sort of be a little bit of a design element. This was existing sort of stainless steel countertop and sink. And she wanted to keep the space open, so we sort of left it that way, but we used this little sort of low, short partition wall to sort of divide the cutting station from the wash station. And then some of the components that you'll see here in a minute was we did a lot of custom fabrication of lights and shelving and benches. We sourced reclaimed old wood from our local sort of green supply store. One of our local tile makers offered her time and services to make these custom tiles for us. And this was another sort of marriage of Dale and I's skills in that we came up with these sort of thin steel rods, and then I constructed the lampshade for some hanging lights. We also collaborated with our good friend Julia. She has a small company called Stone Werewolf, and she helped us with a wall light. We asked her to make a small white vessel and sort of keep the rough quality and the haptic made to it, but we weren't really looking for anything super precise and perfect.
I think speaking to the concept of like Anna Jo uses her hands to express her art, we wanted everything to sort of feel like it was obviously handmade.
Yeah.
So she hand built these vessels.
And Connor turned the wood in our shop for this sort of what we call a wood clamping component.
So these are the parts. You can see the texture in the white vessel. where Julia's fingerprints are actually in there, and that again becomes this texture that gets broadcast when you shine a light on it. And then all the other components are sort of off the shelf except for the turn pieces by Connor. And this is just a quick axon kind of showing how everything comes together. And then this is the salon. You can see the Blanco wall kind of creating a design element, but also the outlets are in the top there. And then the lights hanging, and I just realized that light just went off.
Once again.
Okay.
Just another moment in the space. Exterior shot in Anna Joe.
Yeah. And this is another recent, so we just shot this a few weeks ago, right? Another remodel. We didn't really talk about this, but Darci is on the Tucson Historic Preservation Board. Doing adaptive reuses and historic preservation has become a passion of hers. And this was John Joint was a builder and designer in Tucson back in the 1940s. This was built in 1941. It's a territorial style. He did a great job. I think it's a beautiful building. The bones of the building are great. The main living space has this connection to an outdoor patio that then has a connection to the outdoor living area. And it's all Adobe with these wood headers and the exposed wood ceiling that had gotten Peyton over probably like in the 80s or 90s. You can see the bathrooms were a little dated. But what we wanted to do was kind of remodel it while respecting the structure as much as possible. So expose the structure or expose the materials of the building, and everything that we did, if it were an additive element, we would try to sort of distinguish it from what was there originally. So it sort of felt like a furniture piece in a way.
And I think just one other thing to quickly touch on was it was a young couple. They had two little ones and another one on the way, but they came from San Francisco. And so their living quarters were much smaller. They had much less stuff. And so they also had sort of less need for storage, and that they were planning on sort of keeping that lifestyle that they already had.
Yeah, they're somewhat minimal, and it's a rarity to be able to do a renovation where they're not asking for more and more storage. We were able to pull a lot of that back.
These are just some of the construction photos. Another sort of conceptual element that we added was we added a lot of these large skylights in different rooms in the house. In this case, it's in one of the bathrooms. This is another in-process shot of the master bathroom where we added another large skylight. You can see where we sandblasted the beams.
You know, stripped the paint back to expose the structure. And here it was finished. Added skylight over the dining area. Just the marriage of the white walls and the wood ceiling help it a lot.
A shot looking into the master in one of the children's rooms.
And then in the kitchen, so the concept of trying to, when we add something, it became a furniture thing, and that translated even to the kitchen. So this is a modular unit, gets placed, the shelves are kind of modular, hanging on the wall. The fridge and the range are freestanding, not built in. And even into the bathroom, this is a vanity piece that we built. It's meant to feel like furniture, and the toilet hangs on the wall. And I think even the tub is a similar thing. We pulled it away from the wall and floated it above the shower floor.
We're also doing a little bit of a landscape refresh for them. So we wanted to get rid of all the non-native vegetation, sort of give them low care, low water use. We also wanted to marry this idea of the old and the new. So we fabricated a steel sort of structure, and we infilled it with Ocotillo ribs.
So kind of blending that modern steel structure with the old Ramada from the Native Americans.
And then this was another sort of small folly that we did. One of their requests was that they wanted this meditation chapel. So we utilized Adobe, and we worked with some masons to come up with this idea of this sort of perforated screen wall. And then the image over here on the right is just us sort of testing sort of the light and shade conditions.
So it just kind of sits in the corner of the yard, and it's just an L in plan with a small stool in the middle. And you can either focus on the wall or focus on the plants behind you.
Okay, so we've got two more projects that we wanted to quickly touch on, and both of these are sort of ones that are on the boards right now. This is a renovation of a turn-of-the-century building in Bisbee, Arizona. It's a historic mining town. It's close to the Mexican border. And this building was designed by Henry Trost in 1910, and it was originally a Woolworths building. Currently, it's owned by a company called Object Limited. They're a new concept for resale stores and hotels. So they're utilizing the ground floor as a vintage resale store. They host artisan residencies, and they also have rooms for rent. But one of the interesting concepts is that it's like called a shoppable hotel, so everything is available to buy. So if you love the sofa in the room you're staying in, you can take it home with you.
And I think so. The owner, Will Nathan, who created Object Limited, has this real passion for reuse and sort of, it's a smaller footprint to reuse these old things, but they're also beautiful old things, and why get rid of them? So I think it's kind of neat that he has this super old building in Bisbee. He has this shop that sells all of these really old and beautiful things, and then he, offers it up to you when you stay there. Like, oh, if you love this, take it with you. Let's go. So on the third floor of the Woolworths building here was an old ballroom, and Will wants to make this his apartment space. So this is what it looks like right now. It's maple floors. The plaster ceiling has been removed. We're going to pull all the joists out to try to expose that vaulted nature of the space. This is a quick axon of what the building looks like now. There's our little pointer. This is the third floor space. The ballroom would be right here. That's our scope of work right now. And so similar to the territorial renovation, we wanted to strip this space back to just its pure form and be sort of reductive in what we had to add to the space. He wanted a kitchen, a bathroom, a closet, a place to sleep, and storage for a lot of books. He's a bibliophile. He really loves books. And so our idea was to basically leave the space alone, don't add a whole lot to what's there, just clean it up, clean up the floors, and then just add this one furniture element, which is sort of here, floating in the middle of the space that we're calling the book bed. And so it's one object. You can imagine it'll be just covered with books. And then we integrated all of these different functions within it. So the kitchen here, I guess I don't need this now. The kitchen kind of like pushes into this nicho that we've created. And then on the other side, we have this hidden door that's like one of those secret passageway doors. And that gets you in to the closet and the bathroom here. And then there's a series of steps that take you up onto the top, which is the sleeping loft. And it'll all sort of fit within this one furniture element. And then this is what we feel like it's going to look like in the space, probably with a lot more books than what we've figured here. Yeah. And we're adding the few additive things we're doing to the structure is we're adding 2 skylights. So here, there's a skylight over the sleeping area, and then because he's probably going to use it as an art loft as well, there's going to be a skylight over where he thinks he'll be doing his artwork.
Okay, and this is our last project that we wanted to share with you tonight. We kept it last because we thought it was fitting because we sort of started in New Mexico and now we're ending in New Mexico. This is a small residential house for a young couple. They have a lot in El Prado on the Mesa, just west of Taos. It's got huge views of horizon, and expansive views to the mountains and to the east, and then behind you to the west, you can get some views of the gorge.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see it. Maybe just go back real quick. It's a really flat site. There's no vegetation. You get views to the west and to the gorge, but it's I think that's one of the design problems that we have. It's a beautiful site, but if you go to the next one, you can kind of see like there are 3-acre lots, and your neighbors are far away, but because it's so expansive, you can actually see into everyone's yards. So we wanted to capture these views to the mountains from many of the spaces, and so we had to orient and site the house just right, and we'll use building elements to kind of frame the view just right, to sort of just shoot right in between those two houses to the mountains. So this is just a quick diagram. It's going to be a northern territorial style building, try to deal with the high snow and everything, but we're adding a dog trot to the program. It's not really traditional New Mexico, more of a southern take on that. But where the dog trot becomes this protected patio space, protected from the winds. The winds are really bad out there. We're protected from the snow, the rain, the sun. And then these swinging doors can close off the dog trot or open it up, but they'll also act as blinders to sort of frame the views a little bit better as well. So it's 2 main volumes. There'll be an art studio and a garage up on the top right there, and then a long uncovered deck that sort of is our vestige of the portal that connects you to the entry to the house, and then also to the dog trot you see sort of coming down in between. The living space will be on one side of the dog trot with the kitchen, living room, dining room, and then some stairs that take you up to a little loft sleeping area up above the kitchen. And then as you pass through the dog trot to the other side, you'll have your dining room and another small outdoor living area there in the dog trot, and then the office is right when you walk into the bedroom space.
This is just a quick section, sort of cutting through the length of the house. You can see here, this is sort of where you enter. This is the living area. This is the sort of TV loft here. You go into the outdoor covered patio space. This is one of the bedrooms, bathroom, the master bedroom, and then upstairs we created this sleeping loft for when they want to have friends come and stay or family. And then these are just 2 sections through the space. This is a section through the master, and one of the ideas we wanted to do was sort of find ways to bring natural light into the space, and so we took advantage of this sort of pitched roof here and sort of tunneled down the walls so that this light will sort of filter in here and bounce around in the space. And then it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a section showing the kitchen area here and then the upper sort of TV loft above.
Yeah, and it's a simple form, just a gable kind of extruded along the length of it. But then the way that we're carving space here and there creates this complexity in how you inhabit it and bring light down into it and everything. So this is how it will sit in the landscape with the mountains to the back. Little shot. So in her art studio, we have this big window. It's kind of funneling light in, and then the loft on the other side is going to have a window seat that sort of lets you perch out above and outside of the house. Through the dog trot.
That's it.
That's it. So we're open to questions if anyone has anything they want to say. Oh. I see someone in the back there.
You didn't mention the budgets on any of these projects.
We did when they were cheap.
So the salon was $20,000. Our budget for our house was $40,000, what we sort of worked with. The Taos house actually has sort of a fairly tight budget. It's around $500,000 to $600,000. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for us. One thing we didn't realize since leaving New Mexico is how expensive it is to build in Taos, New Mexico. The contractors pretty much associate it like it's an island.
Yeah,
so
that's what
the
they said.
sort of cost to get goods there and to have work produced there is very high.
Yeah, so the project we did in El Paso, it was roughly $325 a square foot for a really amazing space. What we're looking at in Taos is like $350 a square foot for frame and stucco and a simple metal roof. Yeah. So it's kind of comparable. Yeah. But yeah, the largest budget was the Franklin Mountain House in El Paso. That was like $1.5 million. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Will you share with us what some of those bad habits on?
Sure. I think one of the bad habits that is easy to fall into as an architecture student and when you practice in the profession is learning how to turn off and sort of create boundaries in your private life and your work life. And when you practice with a partner, I think those lines become even more blurred. That was one of the benefits, I think, for us for moving our studio out of our home and at least next door, because at least we can sort of turn off the light, close the door, leave it. Whereas before, we didn't mention it, but that double shower was almost like our meeting room. You know, we couldn't escape the architecture talk. And so we really tried to be cognizant of that, I think, over the past couple of years and really sort of turn off and sort of leave that to the side.
Yeah. It's hard when you start a business to make time for yourself, too. I think that's something we're starting to learn now, to sort of let the employees do what they're hired to do so that we can go do stuff like this and have fun.
Yeah. I think that's probably the strongest habit that I think is important to keep at the forefront of your mind as you get into the profession.
Were you talking specifically about the bad habits I picked up from Sambo, though? That was just a love of bad food and beer for the most part. And a tendency to prattle on too long and tell a long story that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I do think the Southerner in Dale comes out sometimes when we're giving these lectures or those kind of things, because the story just sort of gets drawn out even longer, and I have to remind him that we have to move it along. I'm a Midwesterner, I talk really fast, I move really fast, I'm always on the go, and he tends to be a little bit slower pace.
That's true. Yeah, Keenan.
Yeah, I really appreciate your care for craft and making not just design but also fabricating. That's like such a refreshing architecture. So I just wondered how you find the balance between doing a lot of high design and complex design, and then at the same time being able to take that time and really design and fabricate these beautiful components.
I mean, I think we force it to happen, I think is one of those things.
Yeah, I think, that's another one of those things that we've had to become really cognizant of, because as our practice picked up, right, we got busier and busier and busier, and the work kept coming, and we had to sort of revisit those habits and make sure that we always try and find an opportunity to make something in our projects, because that really allows us to connect with the project, I think, and be able to spend that time.
We were so busy this last year. It really did pick up a lot this last year. The vanity piece that's in the territorial, that was something that we made, but we designed it, we figured it out, and I was like, can't we just send that to somebody else to fabricate? I don't have the time for this right now. And I think that's when we had a long talk. Like, this is what's important to us. We need to make time for it. And so I was a little pissed at first, but then worked through that, and it was the right call. It was like, I wanted to go on a mountain bike ride. Yeah.
Hi. Regarding the Franklin House in El Paso, what are some of the constraints you guys met, and were there any surprises on the construction site?
Well, I mean, so it was a long process. We started with them in 2011. They didn't move into their house until 2014.
And actually, when we started working with them, it was just the two of them as a couple, and they had these plans for children along the way. And when we finished the house, both of their children had been born. So it was that long.
And that was why it took so long to design, because at first it was like, well, we think we might have children at some point in the future. And then it felt like the next design meeting was, oh, we're pregnant, we're going to have a child. And it sort of changed. We had a gym, and we had this massive wine room, which is kind of still there, and a library, and all these adult things.
The stairs used to be a lot more open, right? But then once sort of children came into the picture, we revisited that.
And so designs had to sort of change and evolve as we were in process with them. Yeah. So, that was one. I mean, it's not really a constraint, more of a challenge, maybe. But I think, it's a big budget, but it's not. It's also a really big house. So the budget is always a design constraint, as on all the projects that we're working on. Even when it's $1.5 million, it's hard to meet that.
Did the budget fluctuate as the design changed, or was it still the same?
You know, I think that was one thing that we did pretty good on. I
We
think
did.
we came in within 10% of our original estimate for the construction. But I think part of that was also we really tried to be cognizant about the phasing of the project, and since it was a stepped site, they started high and worked their way down the mountain.
I mean, I think the site was a big constraint. The slope of that site is difficult to build on, and there's only one way in and one way out. And so I think we had some images that we pulled out that were a giant pumper truck, you know, with this crazy crane of an arm sticking out and pouring all of this stuff. They had to work from the top down, but that's a really hard thing to do as well, sort of like have everyone on top of each other as they're working their way out of the project.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you all coming out tonight. Thank you very much.